I'm Liz Liddle. I happen to be an arts worker and I also work at Arts Victoria, and I'm attempting to be an emerging artist as well. Nothing like these two. But I'm here to introduce Vicki Couzens on my far left and Lee Darrick, who are the artists who created a public work installation at Birrarung Wilam, and we also have one of the lead artists missing, and that's Trina Ham, who unfortunately couldn't be here today with us, but she's here in spirit, that's for sure. Well, Birrarung Wilam is a public art installation in Birrarung Wilam outside Art Play, and it was commissioned to essentially commemorate Aboriginal Victoria, and it is pretty much just over there. So after this session you can go and have a look and explore and get a sense from Lee and Vicki what the work is about and have some predetermined, I guess, context. The interesting thing is Lee and Vicki have been in the Aboriginal art world and community for a very long time, and have been working as exactly very well known and artists, and they're actually more well known for their revival of Possum Skin Cloak tradition, but they've also a long time moved into public art, and they're going to share with you what the work Birrarung Wilam is about.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Lee Darrick. I'm a Yorta Yorta, Muri Muri and Birrarung woman. I come from a place called Lockington, up on the Murray River near Echuca. That's my country. I'm a mum. I've got 2 kids, Ben and Zenzi, who are both about to leave home in the next month. Sorry? And a husband, yeah. Better not forget him. You're right, Vic. He's up the back. He's up the very back. Yeah, and I've been a carer over the years recently for first my dad, who's just recently passed on, and now my mum, who's unwell as well. Yeah, so that's me. I live on Raymond Island in East Gippsland with Gunai Kurnai people down there. Been there for about 24 years, so I really like it. Yeah. And
you've got a bit of an unusual connection to the art world in your family, haven't you, that people might not know about?
Yeah, a bit weird. My great uncle, Rex Batterby, his brother taught Albert Namatjiras on the non-Aboriginal side of my family how to paint. So in my family, when I was growing up as a kid, my great aunt and uncle had a whole lot of Albert Namatjira paintings up on the wall. And yeah, we met Uncle Press and Uncle Rex. What do they do with them? I don't know.
You'd like to know.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay, and then my Aboriginal family are the Briggs and the Edwards families, which are most people in Victoria would know, big families.
Well, I'm a Kiro Warrungunditj Mara woman from the Western Districts of Victoria. I was born in Warrnambool. My nan is from Lake Conda. My pop's from Framlingham Mission. And I've got a non-Aboriginal family too, and we all come from the Highlands of Scotland. So I don't mind a man in a kilt. I reckon they're a bit of all right.
Have you been back to trace ancestors through that line?
No, but my daughter just recently went over to a little place called Glenmuick in Scotland and was checking out the kirkyards. There's a few relatives buried there, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mm. Yeah. I've got 5 daughters and a partner, Robbie Bundle. We've got 5 beautiful girls and 8 grandchildren. We ended up with 6 grandsons and 2 granddaughters so far, so it's kind of balancing out because he was a bit outnumbered there for a number of years because even the dog was a girl, so he was the only bloke in the house. Yeah.
And you're sort of maybe a little bit of a fledgling performance artist as well.
A closet one.
Yeah, closet one.
I don't mind karaoke, you know, and Janis Joplin and Slade, a few things like that. Oh, Ted Hawkins, he's pretty good. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Maybe we should do the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, as Liz sort of briefly explained, in 2005-06, we were fortunate to win a commission for the Birrarung Wilam project, which was jointly funded between the City of Melbourne and the state government, Aboriginal Affairs Victoria. And it came from a recommendation from the Reconciliation Report in 2000 to establish and promote symbols of reconciliation, you know, for Victoria. And the brief was pretty huge. It was to represent all of Aboriginal Victoria, it was to tell stories, and it was also to include water. So it was kind of this massive brief, and we went as individual artists to the briefing session, and were kind of, I think everyone there was a bit freaked out about the, you know, the scope of the commission. Anyway, what we ended up doing was getting into cahoots together, me, Lee and Trina, and formed a collaborative partnership and was successful with our proposal, which you can see, you got the report there, but that's the document we had to write. It was almost like a thesis to get the job. Yeah. And that's off the front cover. It was a story about the river, a story about all of Aboriginal Victoria. And yeah, it was a pretty huge task for us to take on.
Vicki, it says it's a story about deep listening. What does that mean?
That phrase we kind of got off Miriam Rose Ungumir from Daily River, I think. And she coined the phrase deep listening. So, and that's about our Aboriginal way of knowing and being, and you know, listening quietly to ourselves, listening to our ancestors, listening to country. So that principle completely underpinned our approach and what we were trying to do.
This is the original sketch that we did of the message sticks, the eel path, and yeah, just a bit of a rough sketch that we started with. We worked with an engineer. Just going back a step, the name Birrarung Wilam, which comes from Birrarung means river of mist, which is the Yarra River, or the river out here. So its original name was Birrarung, and Yarra Yarra was the falls down at Elizabeth Strait. Waterfall is Yarra Yarra. So we termed the phrase Birrarung Wilam because we decided we'd make a camp on the River of Mist. So that's what the name means. Birrarung Wilam is camp on River of Mist. So out of that, we then had a number of key concepts or elements. There was, and I'm not very good with fixed language words here, so I'm just going to say the English version here. But there was a campsite and a water trough and a burl bucket, which were made of bronze. There was 5 message sticks in the end for each one of the 5 clans of the Kulin Nation from around Melbourne, inviting people in to the space because it's their country. And that was inviting the rest of Aboriginal Victoria in. There was an intersecting male and female eel pathway, which is made of cast iron. There's a set of spears and shields that are forged and cast iron. And there's 3 possum skin story walls which tell different stories. And there's a series of ancestor stones, particularly around a performing arts space at the back of Art Play. And the final element was we did a calling up ceremony, which was the beginning of what would you say, making the park alive, if you like. Yeah.
So was there any reason for 9 elements, or does it just happen to be that way?
Yeah, no real reason for 9, except we decided that we wanted to try and cover lots of different forms of art. So we were looking at different mediums. So we went stone, rock, we did steel, we did cast iron, we learned about forging. Yeah, we did a whole lot of different things. Yeah, and we employed a lot of young Aboriginal artists working with us. At one stage we had a factory at Panch, disused hospital, and we employed about 30 Aboriginal kids making cast iron tiles for weeks and weeks.
I think what is important in our conceptualising what we did, and those elements are all related to the central element of a camp and what happens and is connected to and goes on around that camp. So the campsite's not very obvious. It's that little mound that the water troughs are on, but it's sort of what everything is connected to. So we come up with the 9 different elements, and to include that water theme, we had worked with Glenn Romanis, and so we employed a lot of other Aboriginal artists on the project to help either with design or actual creation of artworks. And so there's what is meant to represent, larger than life, a bark trough, water trough, that was often placed on campsites to store water in, and you might, throw a few banksia flowers in and make the water sweet. And so you could just get the water instead of having to walk back to the river or wherever. And also the camp dogs couldn't drink it if it was up off the ground. And there was also a burl bucket. Because water is like the lifeblood of the land, so that was in our thinking. And the campsite is the home, the hearth and the family, and the women keeping the campsite, the kinship knowledge and things like that. And just quickly back onto what Lee mentioned about the materials that we used, we wanted to keep the integrity of working with materials that come from the earth. So the cast iron and the steel and the wood and the stone are all earth elements. So,
it's a stunning work, that element of that work.
And just quickly before we move on to the next, the integration of, so it's not just about, oh, let's stick a nice piece of artwork here, let's just plonk it on this piece of ground. And they gave us that piece of ground. We didn't have a choice of a site, so that's what we had to work with. But we looked at it within the overall vision of what other sites are around, because we are creating a new Aboriginal site for Indigenous people to gather on. So we've got the falls that you mentioned, Lee, where there used to be eel and fish traps. We've got the MCG, which is an old ceremonial ground. We've got the Domain Gardens and the burials and the Queen Vic Market. So it's another site within a whole series of sites. We didn't just kind of, just make up something and stick it there. So there was a lot of thought and a really big learning curve for us in terms of design, because we're not sculptors by trade by any means. The closest we've come to 3D work is basket weaving. So we went from basket weaving to big sculptures.
In terms of
it was great fun.
Commission and vision, how long was it from when you heard about it to when you actually were accepted and then producing the work? What was the timeline?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years. And in fact, for the final message sticks, it was more like three
years from the beginning to the end, because we ended up doing 3 extra message sticks with the 3 other clans of Kulin asked us to do that and include that. So we went back to the funding bodies and found a way of doing that.
Yeah. And was that a full-time sort of work for you, or were you doing other things as well, trying to manage? Because I know that you're really busy during it.
We look back now and we just don't know how we did that work over that period of time, like 2005 to 2007-ish.
Yeah. No, it was quite
without
crazy.
clones, because while we were fortunate to be doing that, we were also doing the Possum Skin Cloak project for the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games, and Lee had pulled together the Baganga exhibition up at the museum. I'm sure everyone was sick to death of us because we were everywhere those couple of years, and it was like, oh, not them again.
And that's an interesting point, because you both live regionally at the time.
And so did Trina.
I was thinking about this morning, how do they do it? How do they be so present in Melbourne but still, be in their home and have a connection to country?
I think I did about 50,000 Ks in 1 year.
I killed my car. I worked 4 days a week, and then I used to work 3 in Melbourne. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
My poor husband and kids will vouch for the fact.
The other thing that I probably just want to throw in here, just to get off that track a bit, is that while we're very proud to have had the opportunity to represent everybody and do that, I sometimes wonder about the state government's timing with coming up with those projects, because you've got to remember the Commonwealth Games were coming up, and I think that possibly we may not, that opportunity to do either of those projects might not have come about as readily as they did. But it so happened the Commonwealth Games were coming up, and you know there was a bit of money around, and the government thought, oh, I should say, that maybe we better do something and show that we have an Aboriginal population and that we acknowledge them and recognise them and are proud of them. So, you know, I wonder about that timing as well. But anyway, it's there, so we do have that presence, and that's a really good start. Yeah.
Do that. There's an image there of, at the top is the Birrarung message stick with the diamonds on it. Original concept of message sticks is that they had notches on one side to invite in certain groups. So one side would invite in 5 groups, say, and on the other side it would say who is doing the inviting. So we made replica message sticks for the 5 clans of Kulin Nation with artists from each of those mobs. So the top one was designed by Carolyn Martin, a Birrarung young woman working at the museum at the time, and we went and did some research and looked at some Birrarung artefacts, and then she developed the Birrarung message stick. So that's at the top, and the one at the bottom was which is the Wurundjeri or Birrarung message stick, and that's based actually on a replica of Auntie Joy Murphy-Wandon's great uncle's message stick, William Barracks. So we actually got permission from family and worked closely with them, and that's a replica of William Barracks' message stick, the one at the bottom. And then we had 3 others that were made later on.
When we were working on this project, because we're working on Birrarung and Wurundjeri country, we had to do a lot of talking to them mob, and because we wanted to use their stories in as a basis for a lot of the work that we were doing. So the ancestor stones out the back down here on the performance area are the ancestors, the creation ancestors of the Kulin Nation. So that big rock in the middle is Bunjil, and we had again Mandy Nicholson, who's now Mandy Thomas, to design designs of each of those ancestors. So there's the blue mountain parrot and the Nanking kestrel and the sugar glider and Gunawarra the black swan and all those, and Binbil the rainbow. And she did the designs, and then they were air chiselled into the stone, and they're all big blue stone. And Bunjil, like Liz was saying before, we all lived regionally, so at different times each one of us or whoever could get to Melbourne for a particular part of the project might come down, and I was fortunate to be there for the installation of the rocks. And we had this massive big 100-tonne crane, and they wouldn't let me drive it, but they had great fun going, oh, you know, where would you like this one, and would you like us to move it a little bit this way or a bit that way? And the first one we put in was the Bunjil stone, and it's a 22-tonne, almost like a, you know, it was round. We had to cut the bottom off so it would sit on it. And as they were lowering it, it was about this far off the ground, and the chain slipped, and it just went smack onto the ground. And we all were running backwards by this stage, and it just rippled right out through the country. And then it stood there and it went like that, rocked back and forth, and we were like, wow. But it was like, you know, that spirit of Bunjil had arrived. So they're there as the guardians and the sentinels and overlooking the space and, you know, watching over everyone who gathers there. And as Lee mentioned, the Possum Skin Cloak story walls, as we were running the Possum Skin Cloak project concurrently, we were able to collect stories off the groups that we were working with and different representatives. So we were able to collect, I think it was Vicki Armstrong, was it? Come and collected and recorded the stories. So, and Lee and Trina and myself had the opportunity to actually do some of our own design work instead of, you know, getting other people to do design work. And we each got a Possum Skin Cloak on the wall, and they're each panel is electronically isolated, and it's on hard drive, so it has the capacity to be, you know, upload new stories and songs from a remote place. you know, like if you were managing it from an office. And that's my daughter, and I said, just look like you're listening so we can get a photo. That's Trina's panel up there. But it's to be able to tell everyone's story, so hopefully they're working if you go down there today, because sometimes they muck up a bit.
Yeah.
And you just touch a panel, you can hear a story or a song, and there's a volume thing, you know, that you can make it go up and down. And
what sorts of stories were people providing?
There's personal stories, there was, you know, obviously songs, there's creation stories, a whole range of stuff,
Yeah, and do you have plans to sort of update them, or?
Well, one of the big plans after the project was to then set up, you know, some funding to go and collect more stories, so there would be a bank of oral history to keep uploading it, but that's never happened. So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be good. And also to upkeep and maintain it, because sometimes the technology sticks and it needs someone maintaining it, and that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
This is an image of the forged spears and the shields, which are made of cast iron. This came about because an elder down where I live, Uncle Freddie Bull, who's passed on since, but he said that people's resolve had to be like steel to work and get things done in the Aboriginal community and for us to stay together. So that kind of image of steely resolve stayed in my mind. And so did an image of Uncle Fred walking down the street holding a huge shield one day, which must have been about 5 foot high, and going down to the school to teach the kids with it. And so I thought I'd really like to do something based on that. So we decided that what we would do is recreate out of cast iron the story of Birrarung, how the Birrarung was created. So we consulted with the local people from Melbourne about that story and which story to use. And then we got a local Wurundjeri artist to work with us and develop the images to go on each shield. So it does tell the story of how the Birrarung was made. And it's a sort of idea of at a campsite you'd have protection, you'd have hunters, and you would have always had around the camp, you know, spears and shields.
Because I guess as female artists working on this project, this was the opportunity to involve men and have men's voice in the...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And were there other artists who produced the shield designs? Or were they all different?
Yeah, that was
from
Mandy.
Yeah, we work with Mandy Nicholson, but we also work with a young non-Aboriginal artist who was really good at the mould making, because it involved making a mould.
Fabricating the thing to make it.
Yeah.
So he taught us mould making.
You know, Glenn Romanis assisted with the research on the different types of spears, because if you look at the different spearheads, like the shields, there's a whole range of different spears.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we had to make sure that nobody could climb a tree and try to jump across and impale themselves on it. So we had, you know, a lot of the things you have to do with public art is OH&S, so people can't, you know, do things to the artwork or to themselves.
Yeah.
And we had to make sure that, you know, people couldn't climb up them and break them or anything like that, so yeah.
All right, this is an image of, it's the male eel. It's in front of the Art Play building, and there's two connecting eels, the male and the female. This is included at the camp because eels were a traditional food source here in the Birrarung, so we were looking at what you would have had once around the camp, and there would have been eel fishing, and also the eel, that's a major dreaming down there as well as a food source, and came about through that concept of dederi, or listening to country, just being with country and then it coming to you. So that concept of dederi, or deep listening, came from Auntie Miriam Rose.
With the eels, they're kind of, you know, like blackfellas, they might leave their home waters and they migrate out to the Coral Sea to spawn, and then they come back and they go back to their home waters, you know, like they're connected to their country like Aboriginal people. So it was kind of about that spirit of that connection as well. And this is the actual project where it's Lee was referring to earlier, where he employed all those young artists and workers to come in, because there's about 460 or 50 tiles. It's about 40 tonnes of cast iron. And so we had to make the patterns for the moulds for it to be cast in. So we employed all the young people, and we had all this huge MDF board, and we had to crawl around on it and draw the designs, and the young artists would come in with, what's that, liquid nail stuff, along the lines, and then it was gessoed, and then it went off to become the mould. So we were doing that for weeks, The last element, which was actually, besides the central element being the campfire, this was the one that pulled the whole artwork, the whole concept together, because we were able to bring representatives from about 35 or so of the 38 language groups to Melbourne to participate in what we called the calling up ceremony. So we gathered down here at dawn, and it was a private ceremony, and everyone wore their possum cloaks because we'd done that too. And we fed everyone real deadly afterwards, but it was a ceremony where people were to bring an object or something to contribute to the site, so that the site was enlivened, that we brought the spirit and brought that through and imbued the site with that energy to activate it, if you like. So the artwork was not complete until all their mobs came and made their contribution, and it was pretty amazing.
It was a closed ceremony. We did it really early in the morning, about 7 in the morning. We closed the park off, and we just had Aboriginal filmmaker Kimber came down with us and took some footage of it. It's on Sister Girl Productions' website.
So it was about that rekindling the sacred, and I think that was very important that all the mob could come together to do that. And like, I'm happy to see with this festival that, that the space out there around the ancestor stones is being used, because that was the intention of that space, for it to be used, and it hasn't a lot since, but it was really good to see it used this time round.
Well,
so that's all the elements.
Great.
I really enjoyed the art. I thought it was great art, and I think what you're doing is fantastic in laying out an Aboriginal landscape here, and that's what's missing. I was looking in Sydney how many Captain Cooks we have, and whatever, pointing, there it is, and claiming the landscape. I thought they were really fantastic. They were beautiful pieces of art. That was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
thanks very
much. Thank you. Thanks, Liz.